Merry meet, my fellow bookish witches. Welcome to Witchy Reads, a place where we talk about books and other bookish things. Over the last month, I have been working on reviewing anything and everything associated with the novel One Day by David Nicholls. I started by reading the novel, and as many of you saw in my review, I wasn't a fan. I thought that it was miscategorized as a standard romance as a way to downplay the overdramatic tragedy that it actually was. I thought it was a lazy way to have the very traumatic ending essentially jump scare readers. I also wasn't particularly fond of the two lead characters, and I feel that is such a gross oversight, especially when it comes to a romance novel. I need to feel for these characters. I need to care about these characters. Frankly, I just didn't. And by the end of the novel, I couldn't care less about them or the fact that they were supposed to be in love. It's a love story, even if it is a tragedy, and I should care about these characters not only as individuals, but as a couple. And the book really failed me in that regard. So you have to be wondering, why would I want to spend time watching adaptations of a book I didn't enjoy? Surely there is nothing that could have drastically changed from book to film to the television series that would change my mind about how I feel, since the story itself will essentially be the same from adaptation to adaptation. The answer is, I don't think it's a waste of time. I do think adaptations can and should be allowed to improve upon the original story it is adapted from. Even the smallest change can make a world of difference to a story. This is why I am a firm believer that the book isn't always better than its adaptations. So the first thing I did was watch the 2011 film adaptation starring Anne Hathaway and Jem Sturgis. I was quickly put in my place. Despite the decent casting and nearly flawless reproduction of the story from book to film, the movie was a snooze fest. Not really something you want said about a story whose goal is to have the audience blubbering at the end. The movie just isn't good. It ended up being another statistic in the garbage heap of poorly done book adaptations. However, there is still the 2024 adaptation, a 14-episode Netflix limited series that took what few good parts were in the book, expanded upon them in the right way, and created a story that is beautifully tragic in its execution. It's time to talk about the final One Day Adaptation, the 2024 Netflix series. Aside from the obvious change in that it is a television series, there were other changes made that I feel really enhanced the story. From the very first moment, we have significant changes. The very first change that I noticed was the use of voiceover narration. This isn't utilized in every episode, but by introducing it early on, it allows for it to be used when it's needed. I think they utilize it very well throughout the series.
What are days for? Days are where we live.
It ends up being the perfect way to drop internal thoughts and information from the characters in a way that the film failed to do. It also has the added bonus of making the letter communications between Emma and Dexter that happen early on in their relationship much more impactful. We hear their words, and more importantly, the emotion behind them.
Dear Dex, or should I say, ciao, Bella. Are you in Rome yet?
Where are you, Em, and what are you doing right now? I'm not much of a letter writer. Not like you. Your last one made me laugh so much.
Through this simple change, I was able to understand why these two characters fall for each other in the first place, which I personally feel the book and film failed to do. This was definitely a welcome addition to the story. Arguably, the change that had the biggest impact on this adaptation is actually showing Emma and Dexter's meet cute. It wasn't until I saw this moment where Emma and Dexter lock eyes for the very first time that I realized this was the only adaptation to give us this. Even the book didn't have this. This is such a huge misstep for a romance story, even a tragic one. I can't believe I didn't catch it before this. Even Romeo and Juliet had a meet cute, for crying out loud. Both the book and film ostensibly begin after this moment. Starting once Emma and Dexter are undressed in her bed, this plot point is what contributed to my not believing their relationship from the word go. Now that I know this missing piece to the story, I have to also admit that I completely misinterpreted the opening scene in both the book and the film adaptation. This adaptation confirms that Emma and Dexter actually did not sleep together that first night. This was not a change from the book either. The opening in the book, to me, reads as a conversation between people who have just had sex. But apparently, it's an extremely cringe pre-coitus chat about their future plans while putting each other down in the most sarcastically British way possible. So I want to stop here and apologize for my misunderstanding of that scene and essentially kind of spreading misinformation about the story. Dexter and Emma did in fact not sleep together that first night, and that is held throughout the book, the film, and the TV series. The next big change that happens is seeing the day after Emma and Dexter meet and don't sleep together in the first episode. No waiting until the very end of the series to see what happens on that day that they spend together and get to know each other. This was the absolute correct way to rearrange the story. Showing this day and the cute little interactions that both characters have better sets up their relationship and prepares the audience for an emotional roller coaster. It definitely had the impact that I think Nicholls wanted in both the book and the film. Yeah, sure, it gives away the drama that Nicholls was clearly wanting to hide to make Emma's death this huge traumatic twist. Surprise! Making this change not only made the character relationships better, it makes the impact of Emma's death far better than making it a surprise jump scare. In doing this, the audience ends up caring more for Emma. I know I did. And speaking of that first day, the series does a fantastic job of utilizing flashbacks to that day multiple times. This is another addition or change to the Netflix series. It is a quick way to express the character's longing, the what if of it all, that seems to always be hanging between them. It is a masterful way to use visuals to convey emotions. It was like a gut punch to my soul every time a flashback happened. That is how you can change a book in an adaptation to visually tell the story for the new medium. Those were the major changes. There were also some important minor ones that I personally feel made huge improvements to the story and the characters. Of these minor changes, the most important one to me was making Emma and Dexter more relatable while still keeping their insufferable personalities. Dexter isn't only a fuckboy dick, we actually get to see his emotional layers. Emma grows more as a person while still being pretentious and bored with her significant others, leading her to still treating them cruelly, but not so much that we aren't still on her side. I think a lot of this has to do with the actors' performances, which were incredible. We get to see actual growth of the characters. The story isn't only about Dexter finding his way, it's about Emma growing and learning in the world as well, seeing how their lives diverge and then come back together, which makes the ending when we are only with Dexter much more palatable. Another minor change that I think had a huge impact was giving the secondary characters way more depth. I'm primarily talking about Ian, Tilly, and Dexter's parents, but there are also other secondary characters that I think were very well done and added to the story. They weren't just filler. All of these characters were amazing, and I genuinely cared about each of them. It all felt real. The biggest shout out needs to go to the relationship between Dexter and his mother. It destroyed me. I feel the series did a much better job giving little tidbits of information, but still managed to give you the entire brevity of what was going on with Dexter's mother, the cancer treatments, her being taken from him.
I think that you have it in you to be a fine young man. Exceptional even. I always have. But you're not there yet, Dexter. You're a long way off. And I'm afraid the person you have become is not very nice.
It was the first time in the story that got a tear from me, not gonna lie. Oh yeah, I definitely cried while watching the Netflix series, multiple times.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
As far as the other characters, they made Ian, who was Emma's other main ex in the story, they gave him much more depth. They made him more handsome, which isn't a huge difference, but I feel like the character was made exceptionally off-putting in the film adaptation to be a foil to Dexter. I don't personally think that that was needed, because if again, the relationship is strong enough between the two leads, you don't need to put down the other character, because it won't matter what this other character does. They aren't in the running. They also made him far less cringe, which I greatly appreciated. This is another piece of that whole, you don't need to put the third person down when clearly they're not even in the running in this love triangle. And don't get me wrong, the character is still cringe in a way because that is how he is written, but he looks decent. He has quirks. He is a real fleshed out character. You can see why Emma agrees to date him and ultimately stays with him as long as she does. In the book and the film, it does not make sense that Emma would go beyond a first date with this character, nor would she stick with him for years, buy a house with him to the point where he proposes to her. I also think the series made Sylvie, who is Dexter's ex and mother of his child, much more likable. She wasn't horrible in the book or the film. Giving that added depth certainly helped me understand the character more, why Dexter and Sylvie got together and stayed together for as long as they did in the first place. And oh my god, Tilly, Emma's best friend, what an improvement to that character. In both the book and the film, she's played off as this very weak friend of Emma's, really doesn't have anything going for her, becomes obsessed with the first man who looks her way, ends up marrying him. That's really all we see in the book and the film. In the series, while a lot of that is the same, she doesn't come off as such a weak character. Past her, just being with this man who we assume she settles with, we actually get to see that she adores him, that they adore each other, and they have a family eventually. I think a lot of times when it comes to side characters, we tend to make the mistake of having them be cardboard cutouts that don't come to life until the main characters are with them. You do not feel that way about any of the secondary characters in this series. They are very much their own three-dimensional characters that have their own story. The last big change that I want to talk about is what they did to the end of the story. The finale for the series was, dare I say, perfect. We do still see Dexter flounder for a year after Emma's death. There are some unhealthy choices he makes, but it's made more clear that it primarily happens on the day of Emma's death, her death anniversary, if you will, because the idea of living through that day of her not being there is very hard for him. I liked seeing that versus seeing that, oh, this is just how he is now that she's dead. There are reasons behind it. There is nuance. It allowed for the character to mourn in a way that was understandable versus just having him revert back to his old assholery ways. We do still get the scene where Sylvie takes care of him after having a bad interaction. This time, you get the impression that he went there because he is depressed. It's a way for him to basically not feel alone. That I could appreciate versus him going to a club, drinking, taking drugs to become numb. And even though he is doing this and going through all of this, we still see him trying to be a good father to Jasmine, his daughter, which is a stark contrast from book Dexter and film Dexter. After this interaction, we have the big conversation between Dexter and his father. The conversation between them as two widowers hits all the emotional beats I needed for that relationship. It was short, sweet, and impactful.
To try and live your life as if she was still here. Don't you think that would be best?
I don't know if I can.
Well, you have to try. What do you think I've been doing for the last 10 years?
perfect. This is also the scene where a lot of the flashbacks start kicking into high gear because we are now seeing the flashbacks as a way for Dexter to remember Emma. And I think that is done very well. Including those flashbacks endeared me so much more to Dexter's character. Then we get the year after that, 2 years post Emma's death. Dexter seems to be handling life after Emma in a more healthy way. Then there is a knock at his door, and all of Emma and Dexter's friends and family have arrived to be there for Dexter. I absolutely bawled my eyes out when this happened because you see he does have people who care about him and are worried about him. He is a good person in this story, and that is what we needed to see. If he was a little like he was in the book and the film, why would these people care? Why would they come to be with him on this hardest of days for him? It's because he genuinely, deep down, is a good person, and these people are his family, and they want to sit with him, reminisce with him, to mourn with him about Emma. And I would say this is the major reason why making the secondary characters more fleshed out was so important. This scene alone was worth all of that. Oh my gosh, this scene was so well done. Seeing these people just showing up for Dexter in his most vulnerable moment, there is nothing more emotionally human than that. So then, of course, we get the awkward conversation between Ian and Dexter. I felt this conversation in the series was way more realistic and reaffirmed just how great of a guy Ian is, instead of it being a cringe chat serving only to boost Dexter's ego on why Emma ultimately chose him. It became an emotional discussion about finding life outside of mourning, which was far more impactful and I think important to Dexter's character growth.
I've got a wife and 3 kids now. I suppose what the point is, I think it's that I didn't expect any of it. It just didn't feel like any of that was on the cards for me. So I just wanted to urge you not to give up.
We aren't at the end of the story yet. So having this little added bit of him still needing to grow, of processing what his life will be like without Emma, is still important to see. Then finally, we have the final scene with Dexter and his daughter Jasmine climbing up Arthur's seat, which was the same hike Emma and Dexter did that first day of them being together. The series does a great job showing the contrast to that first day versus the day he is spending with his daughter while he reminisces about Emma. I think the way that they utilize the flashbacks in this scene are particularly beautiful. Instead of seeing scenes that we've already seen in previous episodes, in these flashbacks, we get new scenes that we have not yet been privy to. I thought this was a brilliant way to continue Dexter and Emma's story, much like how the book did and the film did, where they took the entire first day of them being together and shoehorned it in at the end. I think it was a great idea to show the majority of that day in that first episode, but then show these little tidbits, these little details that we didn't get, almost as if they were secrets between Dexter and Emma themselves. And now we get to see them to complete their story of what solidified their relationship in the first place. And then the finale ends on a kiss, the goodbye kiss from that day, or in another context, the first kiss of the rest of their relationship. I thought that was done beautifully. I was weeping openly. So why did this adaptation not only work, but exceed my expectations? Let's talk about the formatting of the series. Part of my issue with the film was the jarring cuts as we jump from year to year. With how emotional the book is, we are never allowed to sit in those emotions before being pulled into the next year. It very much was emotional whiplash. It was hard to ever feel anything for the characters beyond a surface level of okay, I guess we're supposed to like these horrible characters, and yeah, okay, I guess they're in love because that's what I'm being told here, though I'm not really seeing how that could be. And then we're told, yeah, okay, now we're meant to be sad because one of these characters has died, but the story has already done an awful job by not including any depth to these characters, so I just don't care when it's meant to be tragic. The series utilizes everything to its advantage by using each episode for each year. We are still jump cutting essentially, but each cut works in this regard because that is how we are going episode to episode. We get that pause that is definitely needed in between those jarring cuts. There, of course, is also the formatting of each individual episode, which I personally thought was spectacular. I'm not gonna lie, the film nerd in me squealed when I realized how they were formatting these episodes. Whoever came up with this idea, you are brilliant. It was brilliantly done, and like in the series, Emma and Dexter each get equal screen time, which in it itself is already a welcome change from the book and the film. The series takes this to a whole other level, however, by how it presents each year, each story, in each episode. The first few years, or few episodes, we have a blending of stories as we intercut between Emma and Dexter flawlessly. This represents their closeness in their relationship. As the years pass and we get a few more episodes into the series, their friendship starts to fracture. We see this in their interactions, and this continues until we get the episode where we get a first half only following one of the characters, and then the latter half following the other. That is when Emma and Dexter have their falling out. They are no longer friends. They are no longer in each other's lives. And the episode that follows this only follows Emma for one of those years. Then, of course, the episode after Emma's episode, we only follow Dexter, thus symbolizing the end of their friendship. They are no longer intertwined. They have their own separate lives, their own separate episodes. When I saw that that is how they were representing this visually to the audience, it blew my mind. Well done. So of course, to make this work even better, once Emma and Dexter rekindle their friendship, we get back to that blended style for each episode, culminating into the final 2 episodes where the years kind of speed up. We are doing, I believe it is 3 years per episode. We see them fully together. While I can see there being a complaint as, we were getting 1 year per episode and the last 2 episodes combine a lot of years together, there is a reason for that. At that point, Emma and Dexter are in a relationship. It's supposed to represent that in a relationship, a lot of things stay the same. There aren't going to be a lot of big changes in their lives now that they're older, now that they're together. And I think that is such a beautiful representation of life, of a real relationship. Even though it is jump cutting a lot and moving really quickly in their lives, it adds a depth. It makes me care about the characters even more because I see them in their relationship. I see them in love. It was a perfect visual to follow and had such a profound impact on my viewing experience. We also have the character relationships that grow and intertwine as they would in real life. There is nothing over dramatic or played up in an effort to overly affect the audience. There is no need. The feelings I felt were organic, real life, real relationships, real love, and that is more profound than amping up the dramatics. Emma's death is even toned down ever so slightly from the book and the film, and that in no way diminished the devastation that comes from that incident. We see her going about her day. She is on her way to meet Dexter to look at a house. It's raining, the roads are slick, a driver doesn't see her, and their car slams into her. Not in a ridiculous way, but in an oh my gosh, that just happened way. I do think that is truly the reaction Nicholls wanted and what he definitely got from me. I would be remiss to not bring up the cast for the show as well. They all did perfect in each of their roles, but the huge standouts were the actors who played Emma and Dexter, Ambika Maude and Leo Woodall, respectively. Ambika was great as Emma and managed to balance the line between annoying but still endearing. Emma is still not a great great person, but I never got to the point that I didn't care. In fact, ended up caring about the character very much. Of the two, Leo was stupendous as Dexter. The bar was pretty low for the character already, but he managed to not only play the character great, but added in a depth that was so desperately needed to make this character seem more real to me. There were scenes where just his facial expressions said so much. It made me feel for the character that I did not have any feelings for prior to this. In terms of performance, the scenes after Emma's death are particularly done well and made me completely empathetic to his situation. All of these changes, all of these additions that enhanced this story. This is what I needed. This was the story that I had expected when I picked up this book. And I am so glad that this adaptation gave me what I needed. While I was fairly certain this adaptation was going to be better, I feel so vindicated that it ended up as good as it is. Using the same rating system as the book, I would definitely give this adaptation a 4 out of 5. It's not perfect, but it did a damn good job telling this story. It shows that while adaptations can be done well, and in some cases better than the original written material, I can also admit that this is more the norm now versus, say, 10 or even 5 years ago. There have been a lot of improvements when it comes to book and film adaptations, and I appreciate that this adaptation was done so well. I am of the opinion that more book adaptations should go the way of being adapted for TV versus film. TV series allow for more time and space to fully develop the story. There is also a better potential to add more depth where it is needed for the new medium. From my limited experience in screenwriting, I know that a page usually equals a minute of screen time. If most films are 2 hours, we're only talking 120 minutes here. That's 120 pages. How does that work with a 300 plus page novel? The math ain't mathing. With a TV series, you can take however many episodes at 20, 45, or even 60 minutes each to tell the story. And I think another great thing about this adaptation being done on a streaming service is that the creators didn't have to stick to a rigid episode format. Some episodes were 20 minutes, others went for 25 or 27. Each was as long as necessary to tell the story, which also made it outstanding narratively. Putting episodes in a box to conform to some ridiculous scheduling standards stifles creativity and worsens storytelling. Give episodes, seasons, and series the length needed to tell a complete story, whether that be longer or shorter. I personally am a fan of shows that run for a certain length of seasons if it tells a complete story, versus extending it season by season and risk having the story be ruined. After all, the point is to tell a good story. Sometimes a book needs to be expanded upon and created into an adaptation that can tell the story better. I think that's what was done here. What are your final thoughts on the book One Day and its adaptations? Which adaptation is your favorite if you have one? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoy my videos and would like to support my channel, the best way to do that right now is to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share any videos that you particularly like. It really is a huge help and I greatly appreciate it. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.